Hello, everybody. Happy September. Welcome to the PatternFly community meeting. In this meeting, we will present a handful of updates from the various groups working on and using PatternFly. And we have a relatively full agenda. It's been a little bit in flux, so presenters, definitely take a look at it before you assume when you're going. We will hear from core design, from the React team, from Ansible, and from Openshift. So we'll start off with Michael Coker to talk about PatternFly core.
Thanks, Nicole. Share my screen. Okay. Nope, that's not the right share button. Present. Okay, gotcha. All right, so thanks. And to talk about some of the stuff that our core repository has been up to this past sprint. I guess we'll just go ahead and get started. So we added the stalebot, the GitHub stalebot to the PatternFly/PatternFly repo, just to help with old stale issues, make sure that we're staying on top of things and getting things prioritized and they don't get lost and that sort of thing. And so you can look at the configuration there. Obviously in the repo, the TLDR is the days until stale are 60. And then the days until we close after something is marked as stale is 30. So watch out for those notifications if you've got issues open, and just leave a comment. Feel free to reach out to someone on the team if you feel like one of those issues needs to be addressed and it hasn't been. Okay, and up next, we introduced a new variation to the notification drawer. So we had info, success, warning, error, and now we have default. This matches other components that we have with the same types of status states like that, like the alert component, for example. And you can see it with the arrow marked there. It's got this kind of teal-ish color associated with it. And also, just to preface this, these things that I'm going to mention as component enhancements are just in the core repository at the moment. They'll be making their way to the React components soon. So if you're using core directly, not using the React components that are available, if you're using React components, it's usually within a couple of milestones or so before these enhancements are introduced there. The tabs component and then tab content component now support an additional color scheme. Basically an inverted color scheme as compared to the default color scheme. You can see it here with the gray background for the active tab and the gray backgrounds for the tab content. The toolbar component now supports insets. So this is really great. You can place the toolbar, previously the toolbar had built-in padding in it, and you would have to make some sort of override to the padding to use the toolbar in a context where the built-in padding doesn't necessarily match the context of what's around it. And so now we have an inset set of modifier classes that you can apply to the toolbar, and it will change the toolbar's padding. So I've just included a couple of examples. The differences here are very subtle, probably not something you pick up on in the slides, but the toolbar is a different amount of space from the outside container in these examples, and you can just use the inset modifiers to change that padding, that inset, to remove the padding entirely. You can also use these at different breakpoints, and so you can say at a small breakpoint I want one set of inset, and at another breakpoint you want a different one. We have a new component called the splitter, and this will be used for a lot of different reasons, but here's a potential use case is in the drawer component. It has a little grab handle in the middle, and you could use that to, say, resize a drawer. The drawer component now supports a bottom variation. So instead of the panel just popping out from the left and the right side of the screen, you can have it pop out from the bottom of something now instead. And we have a new label group component. So very similar to an existing component chip group. You can now, if you have a group of labels that you want to, say, have in a horizontal or a vertical row, and maybe you want to have the idea of an overflow label group where you have certain items hidden and then you have a more button to expand that list, or you want to associate a label associated with the label group, and then to have the entire group as removable. Those are the types of things that the label group does. And then up next, we've got a menu component. And so this is we also call this a context menu, but it's the menu that exists inside of drop downs and selects and app launcher and that sort of thing. So coming up with a very flexible component that supports all of the features of those types of menus found in the other components, that can be used outside of those components, and then in future, in upcoming sprints, we'll work on incorporating this component as the menu that's used inside of those other components in some sort of way. And so that should make it easier for users to work with, better for the developer experience, that sort of thing too. So that's really cool. And then I've shown on the right, we're adding some newer features to this component because we plan on using this primarily going forward. And the menu currently supports flyout menus. And so you can see that on the right where you can have nested submenus, and we'll have other variations of being able to nest menus as well available in this component. And that's it. Any questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, next we have, what do we have? We have updates from design. I think Matt is going to go first. You are ready.
Yep, thanks, Nicole. I'm going to share my screen out. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about some work we have in progress, and also some things that are currently available for review. So this slide lists some of the major new features that we're currently working on in the design team, and in the agenda, you can find links to these issues. These are all links to the GitHub issues where we're working on these items, and feel free to comment on the item or to follow these items. Many of these are still in the early stages of work, so we don't really have completed designs yet, but we welcome your input along the way. So some of the key things we're working on: the dark theme, which will be basically a dark version of the PatternFly interface, and Michael Saladoni has been working on that. And the approach we're trying to take is to introduce a theming layer to PatternFly that could be used for dark theme, or could really be used in general for laying an alternate visual theme on top of the standard PatternFly look and feel. Tab usage guidelines. We've known for a long time that we have a lot of options for tabs. We have open tabs, we have box tabs, and very often it's not clear when should I use what style of tabs. So we are currently working on a demo and some design guidelines that will accompany that to provide designers with some guidance on how to utilize our flexible tab component. Dual list selector, which is something that we've just started working on, and some of you may know this is a shuttle selector or a list builder, but basically it's the thing with two lists side by side, and I can move items back and forth between the lists. Scrollspy navigation, which will help in navigating long pages, and form sections allowing of grouping information within longer forms. I also wanted to note to people that basically all of our design work is tracked in this ZenHub board. So, and again, this is linked in the agenda. So if you're interested, feel free to kind of look and see what we are currently working on and what's in our design backlog. So the other thing I wanted to talk about is 3 items that are currently completed and available for review and feedback. So the first is catalog view. Mary Schachtrober has done a lot of work on this, and basically this is a fairly common view in a lot of our projects where you've got some catalog of items, very often represented in a card grid like this, and you provide the user with some affordances for filtering, browsing that catalog. So within this story, we focused a lot on this left-hand sidebar and how to present filtering options. In the left-hand sidebar, we have spent a lot of time focusing on the toolbar and filtering from a toolbar, and less so from this type of sidebar. So that is currently up on, and again, for these issues, I did link where we are reviewing our designs in Marvel, which for those of you who aren't familiar with Marvel is a tool that makes basically the designs accessible to anyone, and you can leave comments directly in the Marvel documents. We've been working on adding action footer to menus. This is something that's been asked for from a couple different perspectives. The ability to include an action within the menu that's not really a menu item. So here we see standard context selector to select between projects, and adding this manage projects link, which could navigate you out to some other page for management of projects. So this would be something general where you could really drop any action or set of actions in this footer. And then finally, a drill down menu where we've been looking at providing a more robust drill down for traversing hierarchical data structures in a drill down. We've recently released a tree view, which I think is going to be demonstrated later in this presentation, so this would be an alternative to the tree view where you don't want to necessarily take the space for exposing the full hierarchical tree in your page, but you want something that will provide a more compact solution for drilling into hierarchical trees of data. So these are things that, again, the links are in the agenda. We welcome your feedback on them, and I'll pause here and see if anybody has any immediate questions. Okay, if not, I will hand it back over to Nicole. Or I guess we have more design. Margot and Gina are going to also talk about some of the things they've been working on.
Yeah, we get to hear from a variety of the designers today. It's great. I think Margot is next on the agenda, if she's ready.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I just want to quickly go over some of the design guideline updates that we've had in the past few months. So I'm just going to go over some notable updates, but we've had a bunch if you look through our design guidelines. So the biggest two, I would say, is an update to the list and tables documentation. So that includes more guidance on when to use compact versus default spacing, more guidance on expandable and selectable table treatment, and then more guidance on a compound expandable table. And then for the toolbar design guidelines, we also updated them to clarify spacing because we knew that a lot of people were not very clear on that. And then just as a general update, we're really trying to get more guidelines out for more components so that almost every component has a design guideline, if not all, which is all part of an effort that we're working on right now. But that's basically it.
Thank you. Yes, and those links are in the slides.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're on the agenda. All right, Gina.
Thank you. All right, I'll start sharing. Okay, so I just wanted to share some of the stuff that's been going on with the design kit. And for anybody who does not know, the design kit is a collection of sketch files that one is a library of symbols that you can use, and then the other one's a template file that shows kind of like the full screen representations using those symbols. So some of the things that we've been doing, we have been doing a lot, but some of the notable updates is we've added these, I called them badges, but they're actually labels. We've added labels to indicate if the component is core only or if it's pre-release. The reason why we added those is so that designers are aware if something is core only so that they don't think it's also in React. So if they're designing with it, they know about that. And then the pre-release would mean that it's the design is set, but it has not yet been implemented. So you might see those labels attached to the symbols. And I just show some screenshots here of for this warning text box, it has the core only label, and then you can go into the overrides and just say no symbol, and it will take that label right off. So you don't have to design with it. Some additions that we made to our symbol library are labels. That core only label is actually an example. There's a bunch of new labels now. They're awesome, and they're really, I think they make the design process a lot more fun. There's tiles, which I show a screenshot of here. Those are selectable tiles. Then there's the tree view symbols. I have a little example of that all the way to the right. And then toggle group, I didn't bring a screenshot of that in, but all of those symbols are now available in the library. And as long as you download the, just within Sketch, update your library, you'll get all of those symbols. And some additions to the template file include notification drawer. So we have now a full page of that. Navigation, because we've updated our navigation. So we updated the template page for that as well. Dashboard cards, which are kind of newer. They actually are created with all existing components. So you're welcome to grab some of those templates if you need them. And then Toolbar, which kind of goes along with what Margot was talking about for documentation. But there's a bunch of different examples of the desktop and mobile versions of those. And then something just to note that's in the works is we have this effort to make the design kit more accessible and align with open source. So obviously Sketch is not available for everyone. It's actually only available for Mac users. So we are trying to figure out a way to automate the process of exporting all of our symbols as SVGs and then allowing any users who use a different design program to just import those and use those symbols. So that is in the works right now, and thank you to everybody who has been collaborating with me through that and for being patient. We're trying to figure out the best way to do it so that it's not a ton of overhead and you can constantly get the most updated symbols. So yeah, that's all I had. Stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gina, and design in general. All right, next we're going to hear from React. So I just changed up the agenda again, but hopefully Tatani's ready. You ready?
Yep.
Awesome.
All right, just something small. Boaz added the medium variation to the modal component. So now, in addition to small and large, we have a medium variation of the modal. So this is the medium variation. So all you have to do is set the variant to medium, and you can have a medium modal. And that's it.
Awesome. Next, React Dev, we have Jenny with a few updates.
All right, hi everyone. I'm just gonna share my screen. All right, so a new feature that was added within the last release was this new feature on the text input component. So now we have the ability to truncate the text input on the left side. So now say if you want to add something, the text box, you can click outside of it and it'll still show you what you added all the way at the end. So that's an exciting new feature. And then if you click out, you can see it truncates the start of the text input as well. Also, another new component that was added was the description list. So this is it and all kinds of variations on it. And yeah, that's it for me.
Recognize the description list. It looks like a lot of the stuff in Openshift. That's exciting. Get that into PatternFly. Thanks. All right, Katie, got a few updates?
Yep, let me just share my screen real quick. There we go. All right, we got a few updates here. So first up, we have a new component, the hint component. You can see it's just another notification with that light blue background. It is divided up into a couple different sections. So you have like a header section, body section, footer section, which is this link here. And you also have an actions button you can pass in. For this example, it's a drop down. You don't have to have all of these together. So we've got a couple examples that show you with just the body, and then we've got one that's everything but the header. So you can leave those in or out, mix and match as you please. And that about covers the hint component. So we'll move on to the next new component, which is tree view. This is a bit more complicated. It's a hierarchical navigation component. It can be any sort of arbitrary depth, so you can have folders and folders. For the default behavior of the examples, you can see it's highlighting the currently selected option as well as the immediate parent. So if you click on loader to close it, it now opens application 2. And there's a bunch of different stuff you can do with this. First up, you can actually add a search. So say you just want the sources. It will actually give you the entire matched tree. So you can go up and down this tree. So if you want to just like application 4 you see, you'll be able to also still get the sources folder. Another thing you can do with tree view is checkboxes. For this behavior, we've got, if you click on a checkbox, it'll select everything underneath the checkbox, and it will determine if it's a fully selected checkbox or indeterminate for a parent folder. If we select application 1, you can see application launcher will update, and if you unselect everything, then it will unselect everything. Another option you can do is icons. So both checkboxes and icons for point of interest is you can define those at an item level or a tree level. These examples, I'll define them at a tree level, so every single option will grab one. But you can actually just specify these per item, so you can have items with different icons or items that have different icons when they're expanded or closed. So in this example, it's folder closed icons for when they're closed and open when they're open. Another option is badges. So this example shows badges where it'll count the number of current children in the folder. And again, badges can be defined on a item level or the tree level. And finally, for tree view, you can also add an action item on this hover state. You can see there's an icon here, and that is just like an active item that you'll be able to program in whatever you want, but it'll appear on the hover state on the right there. And those in this example are added not to every single item, but for a couple. All right, next up is new component for tile. So tile component, we have a default state, and you have the hover styling for when you're hovering over it or selected. Then this is the selected state, and tiles may also be disabled. You can see here, you can also put in a subtext, kind of a description to give more context to the element, as well as an icon, which can be inline as shown here, or if we go further down, you can actually stack it on top of the tile, and you can make that stacked icon larger for more of a call to action version. And as far as and extra content, so if you have a really long subtext, this is just showing you kind of what will happen for the text growth. For keyboard interactions, since tile can be used pretty versatilely, like you might want to have it in, say, like a radio checkbox selection type of interaction with like in a form. So maybe you don't want to have space versus enter being selected, or if you want to use it more like cards. There's a lot of variants you can actually use. So we've got a couple demos in our demo section here that have different interaction patterns programmed in, because right now tile just lets you do whatever you want, pretty flexible, but it's going to require more programming on your part for keyboard interaction and accessibility. You can see here, this is actually going to use space to do a single selection, so only one tile gets selected at a time, and enter, which I'm pressing, but trust me, does nothing. As well as we have a multiple selection example where you can press enter to select any number of tiles except for the disabled tile, but space will just do the default behavior because it's not programmed in. So you have a bunch of free reign here for the implementation of keyboard interaction patterns. In the future, some of these might be bundled up with tile based on user feedback as well. And then a couple smaller updates. Firstly, of the smaller updates for button, we have a new call to action button, just a larger variant that gets more attention. Then for label, once it loads, we have a new flag for truncation. So if you have a label with a really long text, it won't keep running on, it'll actually eventually truncate. And then finally, for page, we have a flag for limiting the width within a section. And since that was a little hard to demonstrate just on a small screen, I've overrode the max width modifier for our classes just to be 50% of this column. So you can see the darker background is now 50% of the entire width, while this lighter gray background, the same text, is expanded through the entire div. And this will expand based regardless of the side nav. And yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Awesome, Katie. You have lots of praise in the comments. Good work. I have some React updates myself. So let's see. The first one is there were some updates made to the notification badge, mostly style, but we've added an needs attention state. It's red and it has an exclamation mark in the bell icon, so it's more apparent that it needs attention. It's red state, as in all the notifications have been read. That state is the same as the basic notification badge. And we've also added the ability to add a count for the number of unread notifications. It depends. I'm going to pull up the notification drawer demo so you can see that the changing of the state from unread to read, or if you want it to be needs attention to read, is probably dependent on the notification drawer itself. So if I mark all of the notifications red in this demo, you'll see that the blue background indicating that the notifications were unread is now dark. And if I close the drawer and remove focus, it's just an icon like the rest on the header. So that's some changes. It's a little different than it used to look before. I'm sure some people have noticed. Another change is we've added the search input component. It has a few features that you can choose to use. A simple search by name as you start typing just adds the clear button. You can also use a result count if you pass the number of results in as the search is being performed. And as I type, you'll see the number of results can show up in a tag right there at the end next to the clear button. And then we also have included a navigable options buttons on the search input component. So if I start typing, you'll see that there are some buttons, and as there would, how do I explain this without the context? If there were search results below the search input component, you would be able to use these buttons to navigate through them. And as you navigate through them, you could see which result is possibly being highlighted or selected or navigated to. There's a little bit of freedom here, but this is sort of the intended use. And right now I'm demonstrating all of this using my keyboard to navigate through all these options. So we've made sure that it's accessible, and yeah, that one is new. So open to feedback with that new component. And another new component recently added is a toggle group, which is similar to the tile component Katie demonstrated. It can operate sort of like checkboxes where you can have multiple selected at once, or it could operate more like radio buttons where you could only have one selected at a time. And you could have icons in it as well instead of words. That's one of its variants. And in case it's going to be on some sort of darker background, we have a light variant so that by default the buttons are not gray but white. There are some accessibility features that I even learned about incorporating as I incorporated them into this component. We use the role attribute to tell that it's a group. So the screen reader knows this is a group of buttons that all are related to each other. And we also are using the aria pressed equals true attribute when one of these buttons is being pressed or selected, I guess. But because these are styled to look more like buttons, the screen reader will know that these options are pressed in the specific case. So that was interesting to me. I love learning more about accessibility. So now you know too. All right, that is all I have. And next, let's see. Next, we have John, I believe, ready to go.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, awesome. Yes, you can.
Awesome. All right, let me share my screen. So, I think we presented on this back it was in the before times, so I think February. But I just wanted to do a small update on our visual testing. So I'm on the AWX UI testing team. And today I just wanted to share some things here. So we have previously, we had been using Percy to do kind of our visual diff testing. We chose it because we got it operational in an hour. Awesome. It's free-ish, but it wasn't free enough to use all the time. So we kind of had to just use it on demand. A great example was the PatternFly v4 update. We used it to kind of get a view of everything that changed. And I believe that's what John Mitchell showed a month or two ago. It's also limited only to Firefox and Chrome. The visual diff algorithms weren't advanced enough for kind of dynamic data, which is what we use to generate most of what we call test data behind the scenes. And the other thing, only 5 users were allowed. So if you wanted more, you'd have to pay more, and that's really their monetization model. Next, what we did was we did a proof of concept for Applitools, which is one of many visual regression testing tools. The first example we did for the cloud.red hat PFV4 upgrade, and that was successful, and we'll show what we found there. But more than that, we were able to do a proof of concept migrating Percy to Applitools, and it was literally 3 lines of code that needed to change. So very low effort. Because it's a little bit different, we actually qualify for the open source plan with unlimited, and I have air quotes because I don't truly know if that'll be unlimited forever, snapshots, but truly unlimited users, and we'll show why that's important here in a second. It's got lots of browsers. It has built-in accessibility testing for contrast at least. And one of the cool things I wanted to show is kind of region and component-based testing. So not only is it the entire screen, but you can actually pick out individual components and compare it in isolation. And one of the cool things is it's bidirectional in that the test runner communicates to the service and back. So if it fails validation, it actually will fail the test. So we can kind of get that feedback a little bit faster than normal. And it allows you to kind of tune it from there. So you can fail in only certain ways. Like, for example, if you didn't want to fail on accessibility testing, if you just wanted to be informed on it, you could control that. So let's just go ahead and do a demo. So the first one here, let me get out of presenting mode, is an example of they call it AI, but it's kind of an algorithm example. So we have, this is the PatternFly v4 upgrade. So when we went from PatternFly React 3 to 4, this is what Automation Analytics went through. Here's the UI. One of the cool things is it does a pretty good diff for us to kind of look at. So here, first of all, you can see our dynamic data problem that I was talking about. We don't really always control this to the extent that we'd like to, but very quickly you can see how well it found the changes, and this is, I believe, the kind of the background masking changes that were added for the Z-depth for the modals. And that's pretty much it. You can see here the closing. But I talked about earlier the users. So one of the cool things here is you can actually have communication inside of the application and go back and forth, follow it via emails, and really pick out exactly what you're talking about. That was something that Percy didn't have. It was just a general comment about the overall picture. And yeah, so another cool thing is if it's not obvious, it'll highlight them. There's a lot here. This is pretty obvious. There's a lot of changes here. But I wanted to talk about the algorithm. The algorithm allows you to do super basic pixel differences, which, as we all know, that's super flaky. So everything's different. But let's take a look at the different levels here. So we made it a little bit more strict. You can see it was able to pick out kind of the masking behind. Let's go one level deeper and just look at the content that may have changed just a little bit more. But the really cool thing is you can really get to some levels of rules that are much more, something that you would really want to fail on, or at least alert on, which is layout changes. So it's running running some changes in the background, and what we're able to pick out here are some major ones. So in this case, the layouts changed such that our little Pendo helper moved, but you can see quite clearly that just one of the elements moved, and we added this to the PFV4 upgrade. So if it wasn't obvious in the jungle of diff, you can actually see what actually changed here, and that's really cool. Obviously not perfect, but something that's worth calling out. Let's see. Let's look at some additional changes. So we talked about unlimited users commenting. We can now talk about the changes. Let's take a look at the example. So I talked about browsers. So in our code, we are able to pull up, let's see. Let me just make this a little bit larger appearance, zoom in. Well, anyways, IE11, Safari, Edge, Edge Chromium, Edge Legacy, Chrome, Firefox 2 versions back, Firefox at 2 different resolutions. So because it's unlimited, because we get all these snapshots, we can really abuse that to do some different rendering testing. And so one of the ways that manifests itself is we can kind of get an insights view how that affects the test results, and we can quite clearly see that not every browser is going to have the same the validation same changes, and this will help us kind of keep track of versions kind of as they change. If we were able to go back, we could look at a specific example. So I pulled up an example here that is comparing 2 browsers against one another, and this is very hard to see at first. Let me turn off this. Let's make it a little bit larger here. So this is Edge Legacy, which is the old Edge HTML enterprise level browser that has now been replaced by Edge Chromium. Both of these are running on Windows, but it may not be obvious to see here, but there are some changes. The closer we get here, the layout of the actual, the static image in the background is actually a little bit different. But if you blow up all the way out here, actually, the positioning of our logo is different. So this is just an example I just wanted to show off of the difference between multi-browser testing, the stuff that we get. We can see quite clearly this big guy here is moved. So this will render differently on Edge versus Edge Chromium. See if there's another example. This is the UI. You can see all the different tests. It's pretty cool. It makes it. You can resolve things within the UI. So if we wanted to, for example, we could draw our own locators and say, okay, well, we'll never actually care about this individual spot, so ignore forever. We'll just ignore this. We can do that. And you can create your own rules from there. So like I said, remember, it's bi-directional, so you can treat this as its own application, independent of your normal test code. Let's see what else. Not going to demo accessibility testing today. We just got this working yesterday, so we don't have that fleshed out. But you can you can set up the rules however you want. So we have here accessibility testing just on this one element, and we can set the rules so we can do the different guidelines if we wanted to. Again, this isn't working. I don't have anything to demo, is what I should say. But let's take a look quickly at the last thing I want to show off, which is component and region. So we talked about the differences between Percy and Applitools. Well, one of the cool things is you can actually just do a specific region. So let's see if I can find a good one. More recent. Yeah, so let's blow this up. So in this particular case, it's not a good example, but what I've done is I specifically called out here to only verify this component here. There's no differences, so it's not easy to see, but this is only checking here. This would ignore anything going on up here, which would be great example, edge changes we saw. And in this example, we're doing the inverse. We're actually ignoring everything but this component. And you can get to any level you want. You can ignore text, you can ignore fields, you can do whatever you want. And that's really why we made the switch. We can use this tool to, I guess, in the ways that make it more powerful. And that's it. That's all I had to share.
Awesome. Thanks so much. That's really cool. All right. And I think last today we have Joe demonstrating some stuff with OpenShift.
Hey, how are you doing? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
And you can hear me, all that good stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, so I wanted to just talk about the Manage Columns demo on the PatternFly React site. So this is under, I think, table demos. And there's a pretty basic column management demo that's available. If you have a table here with 5 columns, you have a modal that pops up with when you click the Manage Columns button, and then you can show, hide all these columns in the table. And it works pretty well. It's a basic implementation, but it's a nice head start on getting column management working in your application. So in OpenShift, we use this as a starting point. Myself and Gina was the designer who worked on layouts and design and use cases for what we needed to implement for column management. And it's similar to this with a few additions. So in this table, you see you're given the max amount of columns, and then you can either show or hide them. We had a slightly different use case where we had a set of 9 columns at max for users to see, as that's the best in our viewing capacity. And we had customers coming, giving feedback saying they wanted to view additional properties on a resource. So we wanted to actually add columns as well as be able to hide existing columns so that users could switch out what we give versus what they might want to see. And so this is what we came up with. Instead of the manage columns text, we have a column icon with a little call out that tells you exactly what this icon does. The manage columns dialog is similar to what we saw for PatternFly, only we now have 2 columns of properties that are available for viewing, and we show the max, like I mentioned, as I mentioned before, the 9 column max. So in this case, we already have 9 columns. This is pods use case. So this is a view that everyone wants to see. So we do have this filled up for now, like as far as what properties are viewable. So as you can see in this case, you can't just add columns because we're already at max. So we would need to first remove, say, 3 columns to add these additional columns. And then once we save this, you can see that our table has changed and updated based off of the columns selected in the dialog. We also have a restore to default. So this just sets you back to your defaults so that if you made any changes, it will update. And this is out of the box configuration. The other thing that we did add to this was, so here you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns viewable. We added persistence so that when you do configure these columns, it's saved to local storage. And when you come back in a different browser or in a different session, you get the same configuration. So you don't have to reconfigure every time you log in, log out of OpenShift. It's saved for you, and then you can pick up where you left off and restore that back to default, and then you just have your out of the box view again. So I think that was it. That was the OpenShift implementation of the column management demo. Question?
Very, very cool.
Thanks.
All right, that is all we have on the agenda today. So I will send out the recording of the meeting to anybody and the slides. So feel free to share those or refer back. There are many links in the agenda and in the slides. So if you're looking for those, keep your eyes open for the email that'll come shortly. Thanks to all the presenters, and we'll see you at the end of the month.
Thanks, bye.